The Galactic Assassins Guild had ruled the shadows for 3,000 years. Their reputation was built on one simple truth that echoed across every star system in known space. No target was beyond their reach. From the crystal towers of the Altarian Empire to the gas storms of the Outer Rim colonies, their network of killers could eliminate anyone for the right price. The guild recruited from the deadliest species across the galaxy. The Rigelians, with their lightning speed, could strike before their victims even knew death was coming. The Morphic Collective could change their appearance at will, becoming anyone, anywhere. The Mentari used their psychic gifts to drive targets to madness or simply stop their hearts with a thought. Commander Alex Reed stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, his weathered face showing no emotion as angry voices filled the circular room. The humans were being blamed for the assassination of Trade Minister Corvash, a crime that had shattered the delicate peace talks between the core worlds and the Frontier Alliance. The minister had been found dead in his secured quarters, killed by a single precise strike to the base of his skull. The weapon had been a human-made vibroblade, the kind used by Earth's special forces. "The evidence cannot be ignored," hissed Ambassador Thiessen, his serpentine form coiling as he spoke. "Only human operatives possess the skill and equipment to penetrate our security systems. The blade carries genetic markers that trace directly to your homeworld." Reed remained silent as the accusations flew around him. He had commanded human forces through 3 major conflicts and knew the weight of responsibility that came with leadership. But this time was different. This time he was facing an enemy that operated in shadows, one that had apparently decided to frame his entire species for a crime they did not commit. What the council members arguing around him did not know was that the guild's most feared operative had been hired to eliminate Reed himself. The contract had been placed by unknown parties who wanted the human commander dead before he could present evidence about the real killers of Minister Corvash. The fee offered was enormous, enough to fund a small war, the assassin known only as the Void had never failed a contract in 47 years of operations. They had eliminated presidents, generals, crime lords, and even members of species considered mythologically immortal. The Void was a legend whispered about in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a name that made even hardened criminals check their shadows twice. But when the Void's research team began their standard target analysis on Alex Reed, something unprecedented happened. The team leader, a cold-blooded professional who had analyzed thousands of targets, found himself staring at data that made no sense. Every human target in the Guild's vast archives showed the same notation: contract declined, refer to Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was classified above even the Void's clearance level. In 4 decades of killing, they had never encountered a restriction they could not access. The discovery was both intriguing and professionally insulting. The Void had built their reputation on the ability to eliminate anyone, anywhere, under any circumstances. The idea that an entire species might be off-limits was absurd. The research team dug deeper into the archives, following data trails that led to forgotten files and classified reports. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about their organization. The Guild had attempted to target humans before. During a conflict known as the Human-Keth War of 2387, the Keth Dominion had been the galaxy's apex predator species for over a millennium. Their military might was unquestioned, their technology superior to every other known civilization. When the humans had dared to resist Keth expansion into their territory, the Dominion had hired the Guild to eliminate key human leadership. The contract had been massive, involving 27 of the Guild's best operatives assigned to various targets across the war zone. The fee had been enough to fund the Guild's operations for a decade. The operatives had been confident. Humans were a young species, barely past their industrial age when they encountered galactic civilization. They had no psychic abilities, no natural armor, no enhanced senses. They were soft, weak, and slow compared to most galactic species. Eliminating their leadership should have been routine. Within 1 month, all 27 operatives were dead, not killed by human security forces or military intervention. They have been hunted down by ordinary human civilians who had somehow identified them, tracked them, and eliminated them with a precision that defied every tactical manual in the Guild's possession. Housewives had cornered Rigelian speed killers in back alleys. Shopkeepers had detected morphic shapeshifters through methods that baffled Guild analysts. Children had pointed out Mentari psychics to their parents, somehow immune to mental manipulation. The Guild's survivors had called it the Reckoning. Within days of the first operative's death, every human colony in the galaxy had somehow learned about the assassination attempts. Communication networks that should have taken weeks to coordinate responses had activated within hours. Humans who had never met each other began working together with an efficiency that suggested telepathic coordination. Yet every scan showed they had no psychic abilities whatsoever. The Void stared at the final report from that era, written by the Guild's then leader in shaking text. Recommend immediate cessation of all contracts involving human targets. Species demonstrates unknown defensive capabilities that pose existential threat to Guild operations. Activation of Protocol 7 approved unanimously. Protocol 7 was simple. No member of the Guild would ever again accept a contract involving a human target. The species was to be considered permanently off-limits. Any operative who violated this protocol would be hunted down and eliminated by the Guild itself. For 300 years, this protocol had held. Not a single human had been targeted by Guild operatives. The restriction had become so embedded in Guild culture that newer members simply accepted it as fact, like a law of physics that could not be questioned. But now, someone had placed a contract on Alex Reed. Someone either did not know about Protocol 7, or they were powerful enough to believe they could override it. The Void found themselves facing a choice that would define their legacy: honor the protocol that had protected their organization for centuries, or accept a contract that could destroy everything the Guild had built. The decision would reshape the galaxy itself. The Void had never experienced doubt before. In 47 years of perfect execution, they had eliminated targets that other assassins considered impossible. The crystalline hive minds of Zarian Prime, whose shared consciousness made them nearly impossible to approach undetected. The energy beings of the Plasma Nebula, who existed in a state between matter and pure thought. Even the time-shifted rulers of the Temporal Syndicate, who could see death coming from multiple timelines simultaneously, but the human contract felt different. The Void sat in their private quarters aboard the Guild's mobile headquarters, a massive ship that existed in the spaces between hyperspace routes. The walls around them were covered with trophies from successful eliminations, weapons, jewelry, and artifacts taken from victims across the galaxy. Each piece told a story of perfect planning and flawless execution. The research files on Alex Reed lay spread across the table, but the Void's attention kept drifting to the older reports about Protocol 7. The more they read, the more disturbed they became. The Guild had always prided itself on adapting to new challenges. When the Altarians developed personal shields, the Guild created phase weapons. When the Mentari began screening for hostile thoughts, the Guild recruited operatives with natural psychic immunity, but humans had presented a different kind of challenge entirely. The after-action reports from the human Keth War read like horror stories. Operative ZX-7, a Rigelian speed killer, had been cornered in an alley by an elderly human woman who had somehow anticipated his every move. The woman had no military training, no enhanced reflexes, no special equipment. She had simply known where he would be and when he would be there. Operative Morphic Delta had assumed the identity of a human child's teacher, spending weeks building the perfect cover identity. The child, barely 8 years old, had walked up to the shapeshifter during recess and asked, "Why do you smell like the thing that wants to hurt my daddy?" The child had no enhanced senses, no training in threat detection. Yet somehow they had seen through a disguise that had fooled advanced security scanners. The pattern repeated across all 27 cases. Humans who should have been easy targets had somehow detected operatives that were invisible to every other species in the galaxy. More disturbing was what happened after the detections. The humans had not simply reported the threats to authorities. They had acted collectively, sharing information through networks that operated faster than any known communication system. The Void pulled up a tactical analysis written by the Guild's Strategic Planning Division. The report attempted to explain the human defensive response using conventional military doctrine, but the conclusions were unsettling. Humans demonstrated what the analysts called swarm intelligence, the ability to coordinate complex group behaviors without central command or communication. But unlike actual swarm species, humans maintained individual consciousness and free will. When one human detected a threat, others in their community would begin acting on that information within hours, even when separated by vast distances. The Guild's communications specialists had monitored every known transmission method during the Human-Keth War, searching for the network that allowed such rapid coordination. They had found nothing. No radio waves, no quantum entanglement, no psychic broadcasts. The humans were somehow sharing information through methods that defied known physics. The Void's contemplation was interrupted by a soft chime from their personal communicator. The device showed a priority message from the Guild's intelligence division. New information had arrived about the Alex Reed contract, information that would change everything. The message contained surveillance footage from the space station where Trade Minister Corvash had been killed. The Guild's analysts had enhanced the images using techniques that could resolve individual molecules. What they found challenged every assumption about the assassination. The human-made vibroblade that had killed the minister showed signs of molecular manipulation that were impossible with human technology. The genetic markers that pointed to Earth had been artificially implanted using methods that only 3 species in the galaxy possessed. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to frame the humans for Corvash's murder. But who had that level of technical capability and access to human genetic material? The Void began cross-referencing the evidence with known Guild operations, searching for connections that might explain the setup. The answer came from an unexpected source. A junior analyst in the Guild's financial division had noticed irregularities in the payment system for the Reed contract. The credits had been transferred through a series of shell accounts that eventually traced back to a source within the Guild itself. Someone inside the organization had ordered the assassination of Minister Corvash and was now trying to eliminate the human commander before he could expose the truth. The Void realized they were looking at something far more dangerous than a simple assassination contract. This was a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the Guild's leadership. The organization that had ruled the galaxy's shadows for 3 millennia was being used as a weapon in a larger game, one that threatened to destabilize the entire galactic political structure. But there was another problem. The Void's investigation had attracted attention from within the Guild. Security protocols that should have been routine were being flagged as suspicious. Access logs showed that someone was monitoring their research into Protocol 7 and the human defensive capabilities. The conspiracy was not just about eliminating Alex Reed, it was about destroying the evidence of the Guild's past failures and the true reason why humans had been declared off-limits. The Void made a decision that would define their legacy. Instead of accepting or declining the Reed contract, they would investigate the conspiracy from within. They would discover who was manipulating the Guild and why. But first, they needed to understand the real truth about humanity's defensive capabilities. The files about the Human-Keth War contained one detail that had been classified above even the Guild's leadership level. During the conflict, the Guild had captured a human operative and attempted to interrogate them about their species' defensive network. The interrogation had been conducted by the Guild's most skilled mind readers, beings capable of extracting information from the deepest levels of consciousness. What they found had terrified them so badly that the records had been sealed and the interrogators had requested memory wipes. The human operative had no knowledge of any defensive network, no training in threat detection, no special abilities. But embedded in their genetic memory was something that made the mind readers recoil in horror. Humans carried within them the evolutionary history of surviving not just one apex predator, but dozens of them. Their homeworld had been a crucible of death that had shaped them into something unprecedented in galactic history. They were prey that had learned to hunt their hunters, a species that had developed instincts for detecting and eliminating threats that operated beyond conscious thought. The Void understood now why Protocol 7 existed. It was not about protecting humans from the Guild. It was about protecting the Guild from humans. Dr. Lisa Park had always been curious about patterns that others missed. As the leading human xenobiologist assigned to the peace negotiations, she had spent her career studying the behavioral differences between species. But the circumstances surrounding Minister Kravash's death had revealed patterns that troubled her deeply. While the Galactic Council debated humanity's guilt, Lisa had been conducting her own investigation. She had access to forensic data that most council members never saw, and what she found painted a picture that contradicted the official narrative. The assassination had been too perfect, too clean, too precisely calculated to match any known human operational method. Human special forces were effective, but they were also notoriously messy. They relied on overwhelming force, redundant systems, and contingency plans that accounted for unexpected complications. The killing of Minister Korvash showed none of these characteristics. Instead, it demonstrated a surgical precision that suggested a level of planning and execution that was almost inhuman. Lisa's investigation led her to request access to the Guild's historical archives through a contact in the Galactic Intelligence Network. What she discovered changed her understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. The archives contained detailed records of every species that had been targeted by Guild operatives over the past 3 millennia. Every species except humans. The absence was so complete that it seemed deliberate. Not a single human target appeared in the Guild's contracts database. No politicians, no military leaders, no criminals, no dissidents. In a galaxy where assassination was a common political tool, humans alone seemed to be immune to such attacks. When Lisa brought this information to Commander Reed, she expected surprise or concern. Instead, Reed's expression remained carefully neutral. "We know about the Guild," he said quietly. "We've always known." The revelation stunned her. "If you knew, why didn't you report it to the Council? The Guild has been manipulating galactic politics for centuries." Reed gestured for her to sit in the secure briefing room aboard the human diplomatic vessel. The walls were lined with technology that prevented any form of electronic surveillance, creating a space where they could speak freely. The Guild exists because most species accept that some individuals will always be vulnerable to elimination. We rejected that premise long ago. Lisa's scientific mind struggled to process what Reed was telling her. "You're saying humans developed immunity to assassination?" "Not immunity," Reed corrected. "Recognition. We can identify threats that other species cannot see. But the cost of that ability is something the galaxy isn't ready to understand." Reed activated a holographic display that showed Earth's evolutionary history. The images were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Vast savannas where early humans had been hunted by predators that made modern species look harmless. Dense forests where camouflaged killers waited in every shadow. Oceans filled with creatures that could swallow small ships whole. "Every species evolves in response to their environment," Reed explained. "Most worlds have one or two apex predators that shape the development of other life forms. Earth had dozens. We didn't just survive them, we learned to hunt them. We developed instincts for detecting and eliminating threats that operate at a level below conscious thought." Lisa studied the genetic analysis data that Reed shared with her. The information was classified at levels that required clearance she did not possess. But Reed's authority opened doors that would normally remain closed. What she saw challenged everything she thought she knew about human neurology. Human brains contained neural pathways that existed in no other known species. These pathways processed environmental information at speeds that approached quantum computation, analyzing thousands of variables simultaneously to identify potential threats. But the system was not mechanical or artificial. It was organic, evolved, and impossible to replicate or defend against. When a human senses a threat to their community, they don't just report it, Reed continued. They activate a network that spans their entire species. We call it the deep warning. It's not telepathy or technology. It's something else entirely. Lisa's scientific training made her skeptical. Mass communication without technology? That's impossible, Reed smiled grimly. The Guild thought so too. During the Human-Keth War, they sent their best operatives to eliminate our leadership. Within hours of the first assassination attempt, every human colony in the galaxy was on high alert. Children were pointing out shapeshifters to their parents. Elderly civilians were cornering speed killers in back alleys. People who had never seen combat were hunting down psychic assassins with a precision that defied explanation. The holographic display shifted to show tactical reports from the Human-Keth War. Lisa read through the accounts with growing amazement. The Guild's operatives had been eliminated not by military forces, but by ordinary civilians who had somehow coordinated their actions across vast distances without any apparent communication system. How is that possible? Lisa asked. We don't fully understand it ourselves, Reed admitted. Our scientists believe it's related to quantum entanglement at the cellular level. Human consciousness appears to be connected through mechanisms that operate outside normal space-time. When one of us detects a threat, that information becomes available to others through pathways that bypass conventional physics. Lisa felt her worldview shifting as she processed this information. You're describing a form of collective consciousness. Not collective consciousness, Reed corrected. Collective awareness. We remain individuals with free will and independent thought, but when threatened, we can access information from across our entire species. It's an evolutionary adaptation that developed over millions of years of surviving on a world that wanted to kill us. The implications were staggering. If humans could indeed share threat information through quantum mechanisms, it explained not only their immunity to assassination, but also their rapid technological development and their ability to coordinate complex operations across galactic distances. But Lisa's investigation had revealed something else. The genetic markers found on the blade that killed Minister Corvash had been artificially created using techniques that only a few species possessed. Someone with access to advanced biotechnology had gone to extraordinary lengths to frame humans for the assassination. Commander, Lisa said carefully, I think someone is trying to force the galaxy to confront humanity's true nature. The assassination was a setup, but it's also a test. They want to see how the other species react when they learn what humans really are. Reed nodded grimly. We've considered that possibility. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for the truth. For 3 centuries, we've been careful to hide our capabilities. We've allowed other species to see us as weak, primitive, harmless. But if that perception changes, Lisa understood the implication. If the galaxy learned that humans possessed abilities that operated outside known physics, that they could coordinate actions across vast distances without technology, and that they had evolved specifically to hunt and eliminate apex predators, the political balance of power would shift dramatically. What happens now? Lisa asked. Reed stood and walked to the viewport, where the lights of the council station sparkled against the darkness of space. Now we find out who killed Minister Corvash and why they wanted to expose us. And we prepare for the possibility that the galaxy will never look at humans the same way again. The Guild's true leadership had not met in physical form for over a century. The Council of Shadows existed as a collection of the galaxy's most dangerous individuals, beings who had transcended their original species through cybernetic enhancement, genetic manipulation, or pure force of will. They communicated through quantum-encrypted channels that operated across multiple dimensions, making their conversations impossible to intercept or trace, but the human situation had forced them to convene an emergency session. For the first time in the Guild's 3,000-year history, they were facing a species that represented an existential threat to their organization. The Void's investigation had revealed the scope of the problem, and the implications were terrifying. The first to speak was Ancient One, a being so old that their original species had been extinct for millennia. Their consciousness existed within a crystalline matrix that had been built into the heart of a dead star. The human defensive network is not limited to threat detection. Ancient One's voice resonated through the quantum link. Our analysis of the human HFY data shows that they form spontaneous coordination networks that operate at the speed of thought. Shadow Weaver, once the greatest shapeshifter in galactic history, had abandoned physical form entirely to become a being of pure information. Their response carried undertones of fear that none of the council members had ever heard from them. Therefore, I have attempted to infiltrate human communities using techniques that have never failed. They detect my presence within minutes, regardless of how perfect my disguise. They recognize something that exists beyond appearance, beyond behavior, beyond any measurable characteristic. The third member of the council, known only as the Architect, had been responsible for designing the Guild's operational protocols for the past 8 centuries. Their cybernetic enhancements had replaced most of their original biology with quantum processors that could analyze tactical situations at superhuman speeds. The problem is not just detection, the Architect stated. The problem is their response pattern. When humans identify a threat, they do not simply defend themselves. They coordinate elimination protocols that span their entire species. The evidence was overwhelming. During the human HFY, the Guild had monitored every known communication system in human space, searching for the network that allowed such rapid coordination. They had found nothing. No radio transmissions, no quantum entanglement communicators, no psychic broadcasts. Yet humans separated by thousands of light years had somehow shared tactical information within hours of initial contact. Ancient One accessed classified files that had been sealed since the end of the human HFY. Our captured operative reported that humans described their coordination ability as just knowing when their people were in danger. Brain scans showed neural activity that followed no known patterns. The subject appeared to be accessing information from sources that existed outside normal spacetime. The implications were staggering. If humans could indeed share information through quantum mechanisms that operated beyond conventional physics, they represented more than just a threat to the Guild. They were a species that had evolved capabilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of consciousness itself. Shadow Weaver's analysis revealed even more disturbing details. Human children show the strongest response to our operatives. They appear to be born with threat detection abilities that adults of other species cannot develop even with training. This suggests that the defensive network is not learned behavior, but genetic programming that operates at the cellular level. The council members shared tactical data that painted a picture of a species unlike any other in galactic history. Humans did not just survive predation, they had evolved to become apex predators themselves. But unlike other predatory species, they had retained their social bonding instincts, creating a unique combination of individual lethality and collective coordination. The Architect presented the final piece of evidence that would change everything. The assassination of Minister Corvash was not conducted by human operatives. Our forensic analysis shows that the genetic markers were artificially implanted using Guild biotechnology. Someone within our organization has been manipulating both the assassination and the subsequent investigation. The revelation sent shockwaves through the quantum link. For the first time in the Guild's history, someone had used their resources to frame an entire species for a crime they did not commit, but the deeper implication was even more disturbing. The frame job had been designed to force a confrontation between humans and the rest of the galaxy, one that would expose humanity's true defensive capabilities. Ancient One's crystalline matrix pulsed with energy as they processed this information. The question is not who conducted the assassination, but why they wanted to reveal humanity's nature to the galaxy. Someone is playing a game that extends far beyond simple political manipulation. Shadow Weaver had been conducting their own investigation through information networks that spanned the galaxy. The payment for the Alex Reed contract has been traced to a faction within our own organization, a group that calls itself the Renewal Project. They believe that the guild has become too conservative, too focused on maintaining the status quo. They want to create a galactic conflict that would generate unlimited contracts for centuries to come. The architect's quantum processors had been analyzing the tactical implications of human defensive capabilities. If the galaxy learns about humanity's true nature, the political balance will shift permanently. Other species will either attempt to ally with humans for protection, or they will try to eliminate them before they become too powerful. Either scenario would create exactly the kind of large-scale conflict that the Renewal Project desires. The Council faced a choice that would define their organization's future. They could continue to honor Protocol 7 and maintain the secret that had protected both humans and the Guild for 3 centuries. Or they could allow the Renewal Project to succeed, potentially triggering a galactic war that would destroy the careful balance of power that had maintained peace for millennia. Ancient One made the decision that would reshape the galaxy. The Renewal Project must be stopped. The human defensive network is not just a threat to our organization, it is a threat to the natural order of galactic civilization. If other species learn that humans can coordinate across vast distances, without technology that they can detect threats that are invisible to every other form of life, that they evolve specifically to hunt and eliminate apex predators, the consequences will be catastrophic. The Council activated emergency protocols that had not been used in over 1,000 years. Every guild operative in the galaxy received a priority message that overrode all other contracts. The Renewal Project was to be eliminated immediately, regardless of cost or consequences. The conspiracy that threatened to expose humanity's true nature had to be stopped before it could achieve its goals, but the Council's decision came too late. The Renewal Project had already activated the final phase of their plan. Alex Reed would be eliminated not by guild operatives, but by the galaxy's own fear of what humans might become. The truth about humanity's defensive capabilities would be revealed not through investigation, but through the species' response to an existential threat. The galaxy was about to learn why the guild's most feared assassins had chosen to fear humans instead of hunting them. The revelation came not through diplomatic channels or official announcements, but through the galaxy's own communication networks. Within hours of the Council of Shadows emergency session, every major news outlet in known space was broadcasting the same story. The Galactic Assassins Guild had existed for 3 millennia, and had been manipulating galactic politics through selective elimination of key figures, but the real shock came with the second revelation. Humans were the only species that the Guild had declared permanently off-limits. The archives that the Void had leaked contained detailed records of every failed assassination attempt during the Human-Keth War, complete with tactical analyses that described human defensive capabilities in terms that bordered on the supernatural. Commander Alex Reed stood before the Galactic Council for the final time, no longer as a defendant but as a witness to a new reality. The chamber was filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy, their faces showing expressions that ranged from fear to amazement to calculation. The political balance that had maintained peace for centuries was crumbling, and everyone knew it. The Guild's archives are clear, Reed said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. Every species represented in this room has lost leaders. Dissidents, criminals, and innocents to guild assassinations. Every species except humanity. The question you must ask yourselves is not whether we are guilty of Minister Kovash's murder, but why we were chosen to be framed for it. The evidence was overwhelming. The Renewal Project's conspiracy had been exposed through the Guild's own leaked documents. The faction within the Guild that had ordered Minister Kovash's assassination had intended to trigger a galactic conflict that would destabilize the existing power structure. They had counted on humanity being blamed, not realizing that their frame job would expose the Guild's existence to public scrutiny, but the deeper implications were only beginning to be understood. Dr. Lisa Park had been granted permission to present her findings about human defensive capabilities to the Council. Her presentation challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, communication, and the nature of intelligence itself. Human neural networks operate through quantum entanglement at the cellular level, Lisa explained to the assembled delegates. When one human detects a threat to their community, that information becomes available to others through pathways that exist outside normal spacetime. This is not technology or telepathy. It is evolution in action, the result of millions of years of surviving on a world that produced more apex predators than any other planet in known space. The implications were staggering. If humans could share information through quantum mechanisms, coordinate responses across galactic distances without technology, and detect threats that were invisible to every other species they represented, a form of intelligence that transcended conventional understanding. Ambassador Thiessen, the Serpentine representative who had been among the loudest voices calling for human accountability, spoke in a voice that carried undertones of fear. If what you describe is true, then humans are not just another species seeking their place in the galaxy. They are something unprecedented, something that could reshape the balance of power permanently. Reed nodded grimly. That is exactly what we are. The question is what the galaxy chooses to do with that knowledge. The debate that followed would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization faced its greatest test. Some species argued for immediate action against humanity, viewing their capabilities as an existential threat that had to be eliminated before it could be fully realized. Others saw opportunity, recognizing that an alliance with humans could provide protection against threats that conventional defenses could not counter, but the most significant voice came from an unexpected source. The Void, their identity still concealed but their reputation now legendary, transmitted a message to the Council that would change everything. The transmission was brief, but its implications were profound. I have spent 47 years eliminating targets that others considered impossible. The Void's message began. I have killed beings that existed across multiple dimensions, entities that could manipulate time itself, creatures that were considered mythologically immortal. But I have never encountered a species that could coordinate defensive responses across their entire population without central command or technological infrastructure. The message continued with tactical analyses that described human defensive capabilities in terms that made seasoned military commanders uncomfortable. Humans did not just detect threats, they responded to them with a precision that suggested hive-mind coordination, yet maintained individual consciousness and free will. They were simultaneously the most vulnerable and the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The Guild's Protocol 7 was not created to protect humans, the Void concluded. It was created to protect the galaxy from discovering what humans truly are. That secret has now been revealed, and the consequences will reshape galactic civilization forever. The Council's final decision surprised everyone, including Reed. Instead of attempting to contain or eliminate humanity, they voted to establish a new galactic security framework based on transparency rather than shadow operations. The Guild would be disbanded, its assets seized, and its operatives given amnesty in exchange for cooperation in exposing the full scope of their historical manipulations. But the real change was in humanity's new role. The species that had been framed for assassination would become the foundation of a new peacekeeping force, one that could detect and counter threats that conventional intelligence services could not identify. The collective defensive network that had protected humans for centuries would be expanded to protect allied species as well. The transition was not without complications. Many species remained fearful of humanity's capabilities, viewing them as a potential threat rather than an ally. Others attempted to develop their own versions of human defensive networks, not understanding that the capability was the result of millions of years of evolutionary pressure that could not be replicated artificially. But the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that intelligence could take forms that transcended individual consciousness without sacrificing individual identity. Humans had demonstrated that a species could evolve collective awareness while maintaining personal freedom, that they could coordinate responses across vast distances while preserving the diversity of thought that drove innovation and progress. Reads, final words to the Council would be remembered for generations. The Guild existed because species accepted that some individuals would always be vulnerable to elimination. We rejected that premise and evolved beyond it. The question facing the galaxy now is whether you will accept that premise for yourselves or whether you will choose to evolve as well. The assassins would never touch humans again. But more importantly, the galaxy had learned that evolution did not end with the development of technology or the achievement of spaceflight. Species could continue to grow, to develop new capabilities, to transcend the limitations that had once defined them. The age of shadow networks and selective elimination was ending. The age of collective defense and transparent cooperation was beginning. And at the heart of this new era was a species that had learned to turn their greatest vulnerability into their greatest strength, transforming the instinct for survival into the foundation for galactic peace. The galaxy would never be the same. But for the first time in millennia, it might actually be safe.